All right, folks, welcome back to the BMX Commentator Podcast. I'm your host, Rich Eames, World Cup and World Championship BMX racing commentator. I like to dip in and out of the BMX world to try and find some guests. And one of my guests that I've got coming up for you today is definitely from outside of the BMX realm, but very much related. So it's my absolute pleasure. Try that again. My absolute pleasure. I will say that properly. To introduce from mountainbikeacademy.com, David Davidson. Dave, how are you?
I'm great, Rich. Thanks for having me on the podcast. Good to see you on the video.
Yeah, good to see you as well. It's been a while since we've spoken. Me and you know each other from outside of the cycling realm, but your skill set and everything else is very much relevant to BMX. So just for the people who haven't heard of you, just give us an idea of what it is you do and what your zone of genius is.
Sure. Thanks for asking. I'm the co-founder of Mountain Bike Academy, and I originally got started into biking when I was like 19 years old, and I fell into it kind of accidentally. And I mean, kind of literally actually too. I like to joke that I fell into mountain biking because the first thing I did was take my mongoose from Walmart and wheelie it down some stairs, and I broke my collarbone and it hurt really bad. So I started off pretty specifically terrible at anything having to do with two wheels. And I just got super obsessed with it. And that obsession lasted way too long. And I'm 37 now. I've got a wife, 2 kids, and I live in Greenville, South Carolina. And what I've eventually got to was, okay, well, I'm really bad at it. How do I get good? And then I was pretty darn good at mountain biking. And then I got really bad at it in my middle age after, life and work and all that stuff kind of came in. And we can talk about that a little bit later. And that's kind of where Mountain Bike Academy got started. But that's the very short version.
The very short version, but you've been at it for a while. So, you've worked with some really kind of top coaches as well. Who have you worked with?
So the initial, well, I'll tell the background story. So Shams March was one of my mentors, and Shams he was a Red Bull Rampage competitor, and he's an absolute staple in terms of the instruction world. I don't know if he founded or he built the curriculum or both, the bike instructor certification program. And long story short, when I was in school at Clemson University, my buddies and I, the fellow obsessed lads, we got together and decided that it wasn't okay not to have 30 and 40 foot jumps. It wasn't okay not to have giant wall rides, and it wasn't okay not to have giant senders in the woods. So we built them by hand. What was really cool is that the university supported us. And so we raised funds. We would get donations from local companies to build all the features. And I got to admit, I was looking through the pictures the other day. The first version of the track, it was a little scary. It's pretty sketchy. So like, if you can just imagine like kind of bigger, stronger kids that study a subject in school, but we're really just 12. And we're like, dude, we should build this. And we did that. And we actually got, I think, kind of good at building because we would watch New World Disorder. We would watch Rome. We would watch all the, kind of the free ride videos. And we're like, yeah, this is what mountain biking is. And so we built these courses. And one year, Red Bull reached out to us and said, hey, we would like to host the Red Bull night shift on your track. And I was like, I think I was the president the year before that, and a guy named Brad was the president of Clemson Freeride at that exact time. But it was a course that we built, and so they shipped down Shams, who was the first Red Bull athlete that was a mountain biker of all time. And I was just like blown away by how much fun it was, and we had a great time. And we were just connected, made friendship, and then I invited him to come and work with some of the initial athletes that we put a program together for. And so, yeah, it was cool just to be able to interface with some people that are, the tip top of the sport, who have been in it for a long time. And he was kind of like he was kind of the person I would look to see, okay, how do we do things? What is good coaching? How do you do all that? It was a good time.
Okay, cool. Fantastic. What a great story to have, you said, the first Red Bull athlete there working with you on your program. So just bringing it back around to BMX a little bit, because when I looked at my statistics for the podcast, the majority of my listeners, as it stands right now, are guys aged between 30 to 50. They've probably been riding for a few years, or maybe they've had a break from BMX and come back to it. They were riders in like the 80s or the 90s or whatever it might be, or guys who've got kids who race and then they decide, oh, that's fun, I quite fancy a go at that. So they get themselves a cruiser, head down to the local BMX track, and suddenly find that their bodies don't work like they used to, and they struggle a little bit with things like jumps and coming out of the gate and berms and all that kind of stuff. They have real issues with the body. So how does that kind of sit in with what you do as I would describe you as a mobility coach, but I'm sure you've got a proper name for it.
Sure. And to be completely fair, yes, that's sort of what we do. My brother-in-law is he's got an exercise science degree and a master's in sports medicine. So I kind of, again, fell into that one too. I married him to my sister. So anyways, the long story short is when you're a rider who's in your 30s, 40s, and 50s, there's different stages of this, and I'll go through those in depth in a second if you want to. But the main idea is that you really can ride like the rider you dream of being at the skill level you want to be at. But you have to have a few certain things in place in how your body works, because the majority of people in the Western world, what we do is we sit for work, or we at least sit 3 hours a day. And I found that there's a tipping point. Once you sit for 3 hours a day or more, which isn't that much, what happens is the deep core muscles get a little bit untrained, and all it is, it's not your fault. It's just that our bodies, what they do is they default to the environment. And when we're a really good dad, a really good provider, a really good mom, a really good worker, then the thing that you're asked to be makes your body kind of, if we get soft is ultimately what happens, but you still have that raw strength. You still have the movement that you can feel. Now, how it feels to be a mountain biker is the same as how it feels to be a BMXer. If you're going back out and you're hitting the gates, or you're pumping through a roller. And what happens with a lot of riders, they tell me, they go, oh my gosh, I can still do it, but my body's there's just something that feels a little bit like off. So when you're 30 years old, it's just like, you just get tired quicker. You maybe kind of get the sense in the back of your mind, maybe you shouldn't send the 25-footer that's a gap. And when you're 40, what usually happens is the injuries are catching up to you. You start feeling a lot of pain, knees, lower back, hip flexors. A lot of riders complain. Here's a fun one. A lot of riders, Rich, they complain about, my hip flexors are tight. They're not tight. It's actually that your lower back is weak from all the sitting. So yeah, we see a lot of these patterns. And again, I'll kind of go through these real quick. But when you're in the 50s, a lot of times riders who don't practice things to challenge their balance, they end up losing their balance. And it sometimes can translate over to the bike. When you're in your 60s, it's a whole new ball game. Usually it's the testosterone levels have kind of leveled out to normal, and we're not trying to go win races at 60. We're trying to just enjoy it as long as we can. At each one of these stages, though, we need to use what I call like the Tom Brady approach. Love or hate Tom Brady. And for those of you that watch football, FUTBOL, and don't watch American football, he's a quarterback that is like really old, and he keeps on winning Super Bowls and won't go away. So how does he do it? He basically trains like the athlete at the age that he is. So I just see a big trend with people who they love the sport this much, but their body, it's capable of being good once, but they can't rely on it to do the things at the level that they used to do. So does that kind of answer your question though?
Yeah, that sounds like literally every guy in the cruiser class pretty much, and myself as well, because I've just turned 50 and I'm thinking about getting my bike back out again. I've got a couple of bikes downstairs in the garage, and they really need to come out. And I'm at that point where I just want to ride and enjoy it, but do it and have fun and not feel like I'm going to fall off every 5 minutes, because, the skills do get rusty. I haven't raced now for probably 18 years properly. I've done a couple of odd ones here and there, but to just drag that bike out and not feel like I'm going to be in pieces by the end of the race day, or, and I do stuff away from the bike as well. I'm quite handy when it comes to slinging kettlebells around and that kind of stuff. So I do some physical stuff. I just need to make that balance and that physical ability better. So how would you advise for, guys of my age, like the 30 to 50, how would you advise the people to do that kind of stuff?
Right. That's a good question. Let me think on that for 2 seconds. So you have different kinds of people where, if you're throwing around kettlebells and you're practicing functional movement, that's certainly going to benefit you. And what I have found, I'll say this, I'm 37. And when I was about 25, I had a very stressful job in Atlanta, Georgia. And I was in the car 5-6 hours a day. And I was in the operating room with surgeons another 8 to 12 hours a day. And that's when my body kind of caught up to me. I actually had a torn ACL and a torn meniscus in high school. And what happened was I went for over a decade not addressing the injury. It was misdiagnosed, no big deal. And I got to the point where I couldn't lift my arm. I had muscle adhesions and I had extreme low back pain, sciatica. And if you looked at me walk, you would say, this guy is at least 55 years old. Yeah, wow. I was young. And so when you kind of look at yourself and how you move and you assess your goals, if it's have as fun as long as you can, I've found that even as a young guy who I'm, average strength in the weight room, I'm average strength, I'm below average when it comes to CrossFit type stuff. I don't even hardly touch weights. If I do, it's 10% of the work that I do. 90% of what I found works for me and for the majority of riders is to retrain the ultra basic movements. So no weight. Sometimes it's very slow movements. One thing you can look up, you can probably Google these or YouTube them. It's something called a CAR. It's called a controlled articular rotation. So I'll demonstrate one real quick. So like a controlled articular rotation, what it is, it's you're taking your joint through an entire range of motion. So for the shoulder, it's like this with the hand in front of you all the way up, and then rotate the hand and then come all the way back down with the arm as close to the body as you can. And here where it gets difficult, pulling into the range of motion very intentionally. And I have, it's kind of funny. Back when I first started Mountain Bike Academy, I'd have people just doing that. We were so unsophisticated and basic that was it. It was a set of cars. And people would write in, they're like, this completely changed my riding. I'm so much better than I used to be. And I'm like, we need to build on top of this. It's that important. Your very basic fundamental movements are the thing that are the easiest to address, the first to go, and they're the leading indicators of success for someone who's in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. So if you guys just want something free to do, go head over. I don't even have them on my channel. I should. But just CARs, like shoulder, neck, scapula, thoracic spine, low back CARs, hip CARs, and it's just CAR.
So that's controlled articular. Just rephrase that for me.
Controlled articular rotations. And again, it's an example of something that someone can do in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, and you can do it daily in 5 minutes. And again, the reason why it's so important to do something like this is because when you sit for hours a day, you end up kind of defaulting to your environment. Hang on 1 second. Excuse me. And when you do these movements, it kind of reminds your body where you are in space. Proprioception is what's called. And it's just super beneficial. And it's such a basic thing. Now, for those of you looking to go like way more advanced, you would want to kind of look at what the problem is or where your weaknesses or where your imbalances are, and then build up from there. That's a whole other story.
Okay. Well, that sounds good, because it kind of almost flies in the face of everything that you see on Instagram about BMX training, because you see, the pros, squatting unholy amounts of weight, doing massive amounts of sprints and doing everything that an elite level BMXer would do. And if guys in their, 30s, 40s, 50s try that kind of stuff, it's just going to be the pathway to injury. Yes. So is there anything that like a cruiser guy could do in terms of actually riding his bike that would give him a similar sort of training effect, if you know what I mean, that in terms of they can do the rotations that you talked about. Is there anything that they can do on bike as well to help themselves?
For BMX specifically, with my limited knowledge, it would probably be gate starts and just practicing those, because they're heavily dependent on timing. And if you're racing, I think a lot of it can come down to the gate start. Don't take my word for it. I'm a 6'3" monkey. That's why I don't ride more BMX, because it's just like, they don't make them for guys like me. I mean, they do, but you know what I mean? Yeah, I would say on the bike stuff, here's kind of the thing that I discovered. And I've talked to people that are really good friends with Luca and Walker Shaw. If you guys have ever watched World Cup racing, the mountain bike World Cup racing. And, you know, I've kind of chatted with some of Nico Malali's buddies who used to work out with him. And they're like, you have no idea how much these guys are in, like, they're doing hot yoga, if hot yoga is a thing. They're going to the massage therapist. They're doing all these things that you never hear talked about, and they do them ferociously. So the truth is that a lot of the workouts you see on Instagram, they're for elite athletes who already built the base fitness, and they've already spent 5 to 8 hours doing, you know, prehab, and they're doing injury prevention protocols. And that's the thing. It's like, I mean, if you notice this though, it's when you're 18 years old, just if you don't get hurt, you're good. You can just go practice, you can push. As long as you're not actually injured, you're good. Then when you're 30 and above, you have to actively like keep injury at bay by doing things that lubricate the joints and whatnot. So it's just a different approach that nobody talks about. I don't know why either. I think it's cooler to get on a bike and ride it than it is to work out. It looks cooler, feels cooler, faster.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think there's anything out there in terms of, you know, training for older cruiser guys specifically. I know certain coaches do personalized programs and that kind of stuff. And I know I've seen some of your YouTube stuff that is specifically around things like manuals and balance and
yeah, I'm just trying to get those clicks, man.
Yeah,
everyone wants to see the manuals.
Oh, do you know what? If I had the choice of being able to do any trick in the world, anything, and I could just literally pop the front end up and roll down the street for like 150, 200 yards without dropping the front end. If I was the king of manual rolls, I would be the happiest guy in the world, because they are just so cool.
So cool.
Yeah, you can keep backflips, you can keep tabletops, you can keep any other trick ever. Just pull up, front end, just roll down the street. I would love it. So how would I improve my balance for manuals?
How would you improve your balance for manuals?
Yeah.
Where I would start is by doing what's called, well, first of all, let me prephrase this by saying, I think, in my opinion, manuals are one of the most demanding. It doesn't feel like it's demanding. It's one of the most demanding things you can do on a bike. And the reason why is because you have to have almost perfect balance. You have to have really, really good awareness of what your body's doing when it's doing it. And you actually do have to have pretty good strength, to core strength specifically, in order to do it well. So when I've done manuals on BMX bikes, like 20-inch bikes, what I've found is that it's a very different movement from being on a mountain bike. So I'll speak to kind of what it's like. With a mountain bike, you're pushing your feet forward in front of you and you're hanging off the bars a little bit more. With a BMX, I've noticed, again, just for me, limited experience, is that you almost just pick the front wheel up. And I mean, you can do a manual where the front wheel is a foot off the ground, right? I don't know.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of a different position to be in, if you will. I found for mountain biking, I've got a video on this on YouTube, but you can grab like a railing or a pole that's fixed and get in kind of a riding position and hang off of the pole and push your feet forward. And when you do that, that emulates the feeling of kind of hanging back. And if you pair that with an off the bike exercise called a horse stance hold, the horse stance hold is good. It's not going to make you a great manual person, but it's a really good start at, can you support your torso with your core? And when I say support your torso with the core, it means that you can, how do I say this? So, you know, like what it feels like when you're not in shape, you have to kind of lean on the bars for balance. But if you're in really good shape and you have really good balance, you're standing in between the pedals. Now, in BMX, you're usually clipped in if you're racing. you guys are just really, really freaking good at balance, flat out. Like all the guys who come from BMX to mountain biking, I'm like, yeah, just skip the balance thing. We're going to talk about doing tricks and stuff. It's like, so that's why guys with the BMX background get kind of razzed for it. We're like, oh, you must have a BMX background. Here, date my daughter. It's like, like it's kind of funny. But yeah, I would just say like a horse stance hold, it helps you kind of be aware of what your core is doing, and then combine that with that drill. That can help a little bit. A lot of times as well, it's like getting feedback from someone who actually knows how to spot what you're doing in a manual, because if you're shoving it forward or lunging, here's another tip for you. The single biggest thing I see people doing wrong with manuals is they extend their scapula like this and try to reach forward, at least on mountain biking. And why that happens is because they just don't know what they're doing. I don't know. You're probably fine, man. I mean, you've raced and you're a BMXer, so I doubt.
I've made all the mistakes, Dave. I have made all the mistakes. Yeah.
So we're cyclists.
I'm probably still making them to this very day if you speak to my wife.
Have you noticed in BMX as well that nobody gets lessons? We're just trying it with our friends, right?
Yeah,
it's like really formalized. Try it with your friends.
Yeah, I think it's just kind of because of the kind of era that we grew up in, like the 80s and the 90s and that kind of stuff. Yeah. And we were short on tracks. We weren't riding particularly brilliant bikes. We only had magazines to kind of look at to try and figure things out. So you would see a photograph of somebody doing something probably amazing and then go, right, how do I get myself into that position? Whereas now I've got a 12-year-old son who's coached twice a week. He's on a fantastic bike. He's got access to more tracks than he knows what to do with. And it's no surprise that he's a better rider at 12 than I was at 23. Yeah. So, yeah, I think we never had that option to kind of get that coaching or anything when we were younger. And now we're kind of going, well, can we do that now? And then our bodies are going, no. No, you can't do that.
We sound like we're 80 right now.
I know. It's terrible, isn't it?
It's like back in my day, we had to screw the spokes on with pliers, and we were lucky if we had 6 spokes on the wheel.
yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I mean, the kids get such good coaching these days, especially the BMX kids kind of in the UK. Yeah. You know, they've got access to so many good coaches, and you can see the development comes so much quicker. Whereas, like I said, us older guys are going, well, we wanted to do that when we were 12 and we never could. Can we do it now at 35 or 40 or whatever it might be? And even if you just have that feeling for like 5 seconds or 10 seconds or whatever it might be, that's enough for most guys. They've lived a dream, and then they can put the bike away and, you know, carry on drinking or whatever. But yeah, there's so many guys out there who just want to ride in some form of fluid fashion for as long as they possibly can. Go do their laps at the track, race, enjoy it, shake hands with everybody at the end of it all, go back to work on Monday morning and just be happy. And I think the majority of the cruiser and the vet guys, that is their kind of mindset to it. You know, there's one or two who are quite competitive, and you'll always get that in any sport. But yeah, to be comfortable and happy on the bike, I think, is the ambition of most guys over the age of 40 anyway. So
yeah, and there's definitely an element of, I don't know, I think a lot of people, they just look at it and they go, well, I know deep down I'm better than I am, and I feel like I've got this rider I dream of being, and it's just slow, and they get stuck on this intermediate plateau is what I call it. And what you're describing is the intermediate plateau, and 99% of the time it's the body, not the bike skills that are holding you back.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times you've done those skills before in your life. Like you've done it, you know it, you never really lost it. It's just that the equipment that you're riding, you're beat up, and it's not your fault. It's just that, again, you haven't got the balance. You haven't rebuilt the body as a 50-year-old or as a 60-year-old that will work for you to be able to do those same things. And I've noticed too, like the way we move is a little different. It's not bad. It's just that when you figure it out, it's totally possible. You just kind of have to have the right inputs, just like anything else. So yeah, it's a very interesting. I'm on the lifelong journey, man. I've had 2 major injuries. Well, one was in high school that I paid the price for later. I blew my knee up last year, and I'm kind of in a little bit of a recovery right now. And I just firmly believe that I can be better than I was 10 years ago. And that's just
cool.
because it's happened before for me, and it's happened for a lot of other riders too. It takes a little bit of work. And frankly, some of the workouts are not always the most fun thing. But when you get on the bike and it does exactly what you want it to, you know what I mean? Like, you get that confidence where it's like, okay, now I know I can do it. That's a totally different ballgame. You know, that's what drives me. Like, I'm full on obsessed with that. That's what I do. So yeah, it's a good time.
Yeah. With regards to kind of, being the rider you think you could have been 10 years ago, for things like, I'll give you an example. I went to the track the other week with my son, took my bike, hadn't ridden it for well over 6 months, tried to jump a small step up and nearly pulled both shoulders out of my sockets just by being horrendously bad. With jumping, is there any other drills that we could do as riders that would make us safer in the air? Because I think that body awareness tends to leave you as you get older. Is there anything that we can do specifically to help that?
Right. There's two things that happen specifically when jumping that happen to riders that, I don't care if you're 30, 40, 50, whatever. When you're a young kid, you don't realize how fast you can move. And so what happens is, when we get a little bit older, we either get out of practice or we get out of shape. And both of those, flat out. And it happens to everybody. It's not, again, if you're a good human being, then I would be shocked if you tried to jump and couldn't pull off the same speed. So the reason why you can snap into the air and create that pop is because we have stability through the posterior chain when we're young. You just have it. Unless you're paralyzed, it's like you have stability through the posterior chain if you're an active kid. And you also have just the ability to call on more raw strength, even if your form isn't that good. When you watch like a 12-year-old or a 15-year-old ride, they're kind of scrawny. They just get the job done though. Yeah. We're the opposite. It's like we have old man strength. I have skinny little arms, but I mean, I could curl like 50-pound dumbbells, 60-pound dumbbells, just like, and people are like, okay, that's not bad. And I can do it a few times. You know what I mean? And so we kind of have this old man strength, but when we use it, we're like an old door. It's like, yeah. And it's what it is. So what we have to do is we have to be more efficient with the speed that we have. We may not have that pop we may not have the posterior chain stability that we had when we were younger. We may not have that raw explosion we had when we were younger, but if you can get to 80-90% of that, even if you've had injuries, even if you have been off the bike for 10 years, 5-10 years, you can build it back, certainly. And the smartest and safest way to do that is off the bike. Okay. Flat out. Yeah. So actually, and again, this is, okay. So when I talk to my doctor of physical therapy, when I talk to my brother-in-law, they typically say, hey, plyometrics once a week max, and you got to be careful with those. Most people are not ready for plyometrics. And what we need to do is train the movements that are similar to plyometrics, but just not have that explosion quite there. And then when you're on the bike, you can, be 80% as intense as you need to be and still get 99% of the pop that you want through that technical ability. So can you kind of see the difference though? It's like, we don't want to be playing the game like a 12-year-old. We want to play the game like we're 50 and we're good. It's just that we have full control over the body. We kind of use that wisdom. We use that experience well to do the exact move we need to do to get the job done, but maybe not forcing it so much like a 12-year-old. And they can, I actually would never recommend a 12-year-old do it like a 50-year-old or a 20-year-old. Don't do it like us. They just need to go out there and, yeah, dude, just pop harder, bro. Just pop harder. And they'll be like, all right. And soaring through the air. But yeah, I think stability through the posterior chain, really important for jumping. And then just actually eccentric loading. So, doing pistol squats, or if you can't do a pistol squat, doing things like kinetic squat, which is just a very, very slow squat on the way down and on the way up. and
Okay.
controlling the body super well through that to remind your body, hey, this is what it feels like to be here and here and here. That's just what I've seen work for people that are in their 30s and 40s and 50s. And there's tons more. I mean, we do a lot of different stuff with people, but that's a good start.
Yeah. So doing certain movements like, squat movements and that kind of stuff, but really taking the time to feel the movement from the top to the bottom rather than just, going into the gym and slinging a barbell across your shoulders and, bouncing up and down like Zebedee on acid. Do you know what I mean? Which is what you see when you go in there, because, I've been in and done into my gym and done certain movements in the past, and you can see all the kind of like the bros looking at you going, what's he doing? What's that guy up to?
Oh, I'm definitely the weird guy in the gym.
Yeah.
I'm over there in the corner doing like, weird movements, and I'm not even that weird. My brother-in-law, he does like handstands and QL stretches. He can do a split and reach over and grab his foot.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, I'm not that level yet.
Wow, that's cool.
Cool. I think it's totally fair. It's just, hey, some of the guys getting the best results are sometimes looking the weirdest in the gym, and I think that's part of why it's not a thing.
Yeah.
Just flat out.
So is there anything else that kind of an athlete in the 30s, 40s, 50s should be doing? Does nutrition play a part in it? Is there anything else that they can do off the bike apart from things that you've already mentioned, the controlled rotations, the posterior chain strengthening?
Mm-hmm.
Where does nutrition come into all this, and how do you advise your athletes to kind of do things?
I stay away from giving advice on nutrition because I have 0 nutrition degree, and I have good genetics. And so I just look for what does my body need and be very healthy with that. It plays a gigantic role. And so what I can tell you though, is a lot of times if you go out to ride and you feel very tired very quickly and you get arm pump, I don't know, do BMXers get arm pump like mountain bikers do?
Not particularly, no.
Y'all are wimps. I'm kidding.
It's more in the legs after a 40-second effort.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So you get leg pump. The thing is, if you feel like you get to that much, much, much faster, it's probably because you have cellular dehydration, which sounds, you need magnesium. And there's 2 ways that you can get magnesium. One is through an Epsom salt bath after you exercise. So here's how to test this. You can go out, have a day at the track, get wrecked. You're like, oh my gosh, I feel completely worked. And then you just soak in an Epsom salt bath for 10 to 15 minutes that night. And if you feel like you could go out and do it again, you're deficient in magnesium. I like the Epsom salt bath because you can't absorb more magnesium than your body needs. It literally just like absorbs through your skin. And then once you have enough, it's like equilibrium. You don't need any more. You're good. Oh, wow. I don't know how to turn that off.
Is that how we got the effects?
Apparently I have the effects on. I'm just going to leave it. So yeah, that's one thing you can do is look at your magnesium. That's a super easy fix. Almost everybody gets feeling like they're dehydrated and their performance drops. And that tends to be, I don't know, in America, we have 90% of people are deficient in magnesium, vitamin D, calcium. We're just deficient in our minerals. So making sure you get enough magnesium. The second way to get magnesium would be just through like a dropper, like a liquid, or like you can take supplements. Those can be a bit risky because if you take too much magnesium, it'll just upset your stomach and you'll be on the toilet all day, which is not BMXing.
No, so, you don't need that at the track, not with the portaloos.
Yeah, exactly. So it's very, obviously nutrition's extremely important, even more so than recovery. The other big mistake I see mountain bikers make, so we're a bunch of skinny guys to begin with. We're computer engineers. We're not usually your typical meathead, just full of muscle, eating protein all the time. You probably aren't getting enough protein. So again, something I do is I eat a ton of protein. I eat almost 200 grams of protein a day, and I try to keep it to be very, very healthy. So I eat a slab of salmon every morning, and I eat oatmeal, I eat chicken. I've kind of started moving away from red meat. I just don't feel like I like it. I don't feel necessarily good or bad on it. It's just that I've noticed that I feel very clear-headed when I have the salmon, the chicken, broccoli, rice. I sound like I eat really boring. I'm married to an Italian, and she she makes very interesting food, and I eat that for dinner. So yeah,
Right. Okay.
yeah. The biggest mistake I see with that is like not enough protein. You're not getting minerals. You're eating a bunch of high calorie, low nutrition food. It's just the Western world.
Yeah.
If you go and you close your eyes and you randomly pick food from places where food is fed to you, 80% of it's going to be garbage.
Yeah.
It's just, so you have to be very intentional about eating the right thing. Macros are important for the guys who put on weight. I think that it's very simple. You eat the right amount of food, maybe stay in a little bit of a deficit, make sure you're still getting your protein, because frankly, you're out there doing pretty extremely hard stuff. You need the protein. So
yeah,
I found that's kind of how to look at it for me personally.
Okay, because I think for most guys who are racing BMX, I think they just want to be able to kind of get to a point where they can do, 5 or 6 race lap efforts in a day, go through a day's racing and not be utterly gassed at the end of it. And I think that's kind of where I'm at, in that I want to get back on the bike and I want to do the odd race here and there.
Right.
But I know that if I went to the track on Saturday, because we've got like a local race up at Manchester, I could go and enter Super Saturday and I could do, 4 full lap efforts, and I wouldn't be able to move on Sunday. I'd be absolutely knackered. So it's just bringing myself back up to a point where I can do multiple race efforts over the course of a day without feeling like I need 3 days off afterwards.
Yeah, and the difference, when at least the people that I work with, when they're in their 50s, we can't push as hard as we used to, and so we need to be very aware of how hard to push to train for that. And then the other one is sleep. If you got kids, right? So this is kind of a funny one, but I'm like, you should sleep more, and everyone's like, haha, yeah, right. I'm like, I know, but one of the things that I found helps a ton for recovery is going to bed at night at the same time and waking up in the morning at the same time every day. And it sounds so basic, but nobody really does it except for the routine people. And when you do that, it allows your circadian rhythms to get in sync, and 100% of your recovery is when you're asleep.
Yeah.
That's obviously not literal, but when we sleep, that's when our body rebuilds. And if you're not giving your body a chance to do that for 20 to 30 years or 5 years, even if that impacts your recovery 20% down, then you do that over years and years, and that kind of deficit stacks up. And so when we do go and push ourselves at the track, or when we do a long downhill section, or you go and you race five all full out laps, you never gave yourself a chance if you don't have that rest and recovery leading up to it and post race. So I would say sleep is probably the number one lever to pull, and followed closely by nutrition. So nutrition and movement are both just, if you don't have either one, good luck.
Yeah.
You're just gonna get clobbered. But
okay.
Yeah, that's kind of it's a lot, man. You're going to have to be pretty intentional about your schedule.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's
I do this, but I don't even do it perfectly. There's no way. I have kids, they've got to play on Thursday. So am I going to get my workout in? Absolutely not. And I'm not waking up at 4. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, no, I don't think anybody's waking up at 4 unless they absolutely have to, or the house is on fire. So yeah,
Here's that.
So just to have that kind of information come through, I think most of the lads who would be listening to this and wondering, what they can do, the answers to begin with are actually very simple. So kind of bringing that around to what you do, Dave, tell us a bit more about your program and how it could possibly help a rider.
Yeah, so I help intermediate riders shred with confidence and virtually eliminate crashes. And we do that through bike body synthesis, which is everything I talked about. It's like you have to be, here's the thesis. If you have a body that you can do anything with, you can do anything on the bike. And so we just work on both. However, we focus on making sure that the body is able to do the moves on the bike. And why I found this is so important is because you can copy perfect body position using the wrong muscles. And when you use the wrong muscles, you get tired very quickly. It doesn't feel good, and it leads to crashes. So we just fix that.
Okay.
It's actually the same for BMX and mountain biking. BMX, it's a little bit more power and explosion focused, and it's less focused on, goofy things like track stands and trials hops and things like that some of the mountain bikers like.
Okay. Cool. Is there a place where people can find out more about what you do and what you offer? Is there anything that they can kind of get to maybe, start off and do a few things, and then if they're keen on what they've experienced, can they go further?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I'm American, so I'm pretty direct. It's like, if you want to buy my program, you can come join it. But what I would do first before that is kind of check out my YouTube. There's a link, excuse me, there's a link on just about every video to say, hey, come join the community. We're just on a mission to help 10,000 riders shred with confidence. So would love to have some BMXers in there. I have some BMXers in there. They also like mountain biking. So yeah, it's go to the YouTube channel. It's at Mountain Bike Academy on YouTube, at the little ampersand, Mountain Bike Academy, all spelled out like one word. And the other way to do it too, I'll give you a link for my email list. If you guys want to be on that, I do sometimes offer a little bit different insight through the email list as well. I'd love to build that. And so anyone who's just curious, wants to hang out, check out YouTube. And if you're just like, man, I got a hole burning in my pocket full of extra cash and I really want to invest in my riding, come on, we'll love to have you, and we're going to have a good time. So.
Okay, cool. That sounds like the absolute, well, very nearly the perfect spot to leave it. Actually, I've got one more question.
Sure.
If you've got one kind of pearl of wisdom to give the aging rider now, you could just leave them with one thing, Dave, what would you leave them with?
I would say you can do it, not just because I believe in you and that sounds positive, but you can do it because when you take the time and the effort to be able to move your body in the way that you need to, you can do anything on the bike. And when you put the right inputs in, you can get those amazing outputs that make you feel like a champion on the bike, make your kids go, Dad, I didn't realize you were that good. So, that's the goal, right? You can do it as long as you have the right inputs and as long as you have the right intention behind it and the right practice. So I would encourage everyone here, like, guys, it's mountain biking, it's BMX, it's cycling. It's kind of our weird little thing, but there's so many people out there that love it as much as we do. And you can really be super good at it, if not great, if you just practice and do it the right way.
Cool. Fantastic. That sounds like a perfect place to leave it, Dave. So David Davidson of mountainbikeacademy.com, thank you for joining me on the BMX Commentator Podcast. And everybody out there listening, I will put a link to Dave's YouTube channel in the podcast description. Go and check it out, have a look, see what he does, and see if you can, find a way to benefit your riding and move even better.
Thanks so much. It's great being on the show. Appreciate
you.
Cool.
Thanks, Dave.
You're welcome.